So here we're going to go over a DFA, deterministic finite automata. All right, and we're going to design one, right? Design what it would look like here based on the accepting state, and go over the different characteristics. Well, so there's no particular algorithm to design the DFA from just a description. So we just want to set forth, identify all the characteristics, the input read, determine whether a string can still be accepted, and we want to make sure that we enumerate all meaningful combinations, right? And add transitions that make sense. Right? Make the start state the one corresponding to the empty string. All right, so that is a good way to start. It's like, well, if I give it the empty string, in which state would it enter, right? And then make the accepting state those where the characteristics match the acceptance condition. All right, so let's take a look at an example from the Critchlow textbook here. For the example, we want to design a DFA over the alphabet AB. All right, and L will define as a string W, which is an element of the set of all strings over the alphabet AB, such that NA of W and NB of W are both even. So in other words, there are an even number of A's and B's in a string. All right, so we want to identify all the different states, right? So there's going to be 4 different states, right? So the corresponding NAW, NAP, right? So they're both even, right? So that'll be our ending one, right? So they can both be odd. A could be odd, and then B could be even, or vice versa. A, there could be a even number of A's and an odd number of B's. All right, so and here, this is also going to be our starting state, since the empty string is in this state, right? Having 0, a length 0, that corresponds to 0 A's, 0 B's, which those are even numbers. All right, so here we'll start. This is our Q0. So this is our start and our end, right? If we end there, then the string is accepted. If we don't end there, then it is rejected. All right, call this Q1, Q2, and Q3. All right, and then we'll set up the different transitions, right? So if we think of this here, you say, all right, well, if I start, well, actually, I think what might be better here is, so this is where we're at, right? We have 4 states, right? And the transitions here are going to be, if I'm at Q0, right? And from there, I can jump to 2 different states, or I can jump to 1 or 2 states, depending on what happens. If I get an A, that means I go from even to odd, but B is still even. So that means from there I go to Q2. If I go to B, B now becomes odd, but A is still even, so that is Q3. Now if I find myself in state Q1, right, where they're both odd, that means that if I have an A as the next character encountered here, then we go to even, but B is still odd, so that goes to Q3. Okay? And if I'm in Q1, right, and I get a B, so now B becomes even, then I go to Q2. All right? And then if I found myself in Q2 where A is odd and B is even, so if I get an A, they're both even, Q0, right? And if I get a B, then I'm back at Q1 where they're both odd here. All right, and if I find myself in Q3, right, Q3 being even A's, odd B's, if I get an A, then I go to both being odd, so we get to Q1. Oops, this one up here is Q1. And if I'm in Q3, even odd number of B's, if I get another B, then I'm back at my Q0 state of even. Okay, so let's try to draw the transition in the diagram here. Oops. All right, so the transition diagram would look something like this. Now we have our 4 states here, and let's just kind of model it so we can kind of see here. So we have our intro here, our start is Q0 here, and then from here, okay, so I want to designate my Q naught as my acceptance state, right? And then I also set it as my starting here, okay? Okay. And now I'm going to add a transition, right? Not state, add a transition here. So if I'm in Q naught, right, and I go to Q2, if I get an A, right, here, so the symbol here is A, all right. So if I get a B, I go to Q3. Right. So that gives me Q3. All right. Now if I find myself in Q1, excuse me, Q1, all right, and if I get an A, then I go to Q3. So that is A. All right, now it's a nice tool. This you don't have to define the alphabet. It'll just, as you kind of start building your transition diagram here, it will build it out for you. All right, so if we start at Q1 and we add an A, we go to Q3. If we add a B, we go to Q2. All right, so symbol B. All right, and now if I'm in Q2, if I add an A, I go to Q naught. All right, so that is A. All right, and if I add a B, I go to Q1. This one is B. Okay, and if I find myself in Q3 and I add an A, I go to Q1. All right, and if I go to Q3, if I'm in Q3 and myself a B, then I go to Q naught. So it looks something like this. All right. Okay, so now we set it up here. Now let's test it out here. So I'll go to step-by-step mode here. All right, so we start at Q naught, right? We enter with the empty string, and let's say the string was just A. Okay. All right, and we see here we are rejected here. Yes. here. Let me see what it is. Okay, let's see here. Okay, so here we're at Q naught. Then we go to Q2. All right. And then we go Q naught, accepted, right? Final state is Q naught. All right, so here. All right, sorry, I didn't know why that one was highlighted there. I think it just an accident there. Okay, so now we see how this works, right? We're doing step-by-step mode here, and we see it's accepted. So let's look at one where we just, let's see here. Okay, and then here we see, all right, so we test here and we step, right? Initial state, we add an A, right? Go to Q2, then Q1, we add a B, A, B, A, B, A. So see it just going around here, working its way each step of the way here till I reach the end. All right, and the final step here, it is accepted, right? It reaches the, it ends up at Q naught, and that is our accepted state, right? Our end state. All right. Now here, let's take a look at, how about, look something like this, A, B, B, B. So we see that it's just not accepting every string here. All right, so let's test it out here. Okay, so we have our starting point. We go A, so it goes to Q2. Get another A, it goes back to Q naught. One more A swings you back to Q2, and now we have 3 B's coming up, so it should just alternate between Q2 and Q1. And there, we come to an end. We found ourselves in Q1, which is not our Q naught, so this is rejected. Okay, so this is how we can design kind of the DFA. The transition here allows a visual representation, kind of easier to kind of see here what exactly is going on. All right, so it'll test any string of any length, right? And determine whether it should be rejected or accepted into the language, depending again, of course, whether what it's testing for is if you have an even number of A's and B's, right? So there's a parity there for both of them, right? Which can be a bit tricky.